Chapter 17. Okay, so I had some goals now. It's good to have direction. I had to get Tamrat to talk to me, so I could let her know everything that was going on without alerting her annoying fiancé. I then had to convince everyone that rather than planning an escape back home, we should plan on impossibly carrying out Director Glee-Wick-Six's dying wish and venture on a hopeless mission into the unknown, beneath the surface of the station. As a general rule, people can be reluctant to visit a place called the Forbidden Zone, but I had to convince them that going was not an idiotic thing to do. I was halfway across the compound when I received a message that Interim Director Junip wanted to meet with us in 2 hours. There was nothing to do but wait it out, hear what he had to say, and then see how I wanted to proceed afterwards. I showed up in the meeting room a little early, but the other humans and Steve were already there. A few minutes later, Tamrat and Vilonik came in and sat at the far end of the table away from us. I looked over at Tamrat. Her ears pivoted towards me, and she smiled. Vilonik whispered something in her ear, and she looked down. Junip now stormed into the room, his cape rippling dramatically, which I suspected was the main purpose of the cape. He was followed by Ardov, who was wearing a crisply tailored, boxy Confederation suit, his Movement for Peace armband on full display. Junip sat behind the desk, and Ardov stood behind him like he was at attention. Without looking at us, Junip called up a projection of text from his data bracelet. He grunted as he looked it over and then waved a finger in what I believed was a signature, and the text vanished.
"I apologize," he said. "Being interim director is a whirlwind of activity. I'm afraid it never stops."
No one spoke. Perhaps because we didn't believe Junip was actually apologizing for anything, and perhaps because he seemed to be inviting us to say how sorry we were that taking over the job of a being he had probably murdered was turning out to be sort of a bummer. Junip looked like he was about to say something else, but then turned to Vilonik.
"Who are you?"
Vilonik smiled and stood up, bowing in a way that appeared both respectfully old-fashioned and laughably dumb. There were a lot of hand flourishes, some head bobbing, and a little dance with his left foot.
"I am Vilonik, 5th Sikon of House Agitage, 3rd rung of the caste of the Elevated."
"How fascinating," Junip said, "but my inquiry had more to do with what you're doing in this room at this moment."
Vilonik performed the same bow, though the foot movements varied a little bit this time. It was nice to have some variety, I guess.
"I beg your pardon, Interim Director Junip. As Tamrat Sion, betrothed of House Agitage, has folded her being into my caste, I am her protector and so responsible for her safety. This was negotiated by your representatives when they came to Rarl. Our custom is that she may not travel without my permission and accompaniment."
Junip summoned a keyboard and tapped furiously for a moment.
"Yes, my records indicate you've been given security clearance."
"That the honor deities have chosen my family for special notice is on record," Vilonik said.
"Yes, it says that right here,"
Junip said, still reading the text.
"Apparently your presence was a non-negotiable term for your government. Well, I suppose we must endure it."
"He's a harmless, primitive director," Ardov said. I waved my hand between the two of them. "You know you both come from the same world, right?" "He has not been enlightened by the wisdom of the Confederation," Ardov said. "He's no less primitive than you."
"Thank you, Ardov,"
Junip said, almost kindly. He turned to Vilonik.
"I now know why you are here, but I still don't care. When I speak to the others, if there is anything you don't understand, please do not in any way express your confusion. Allow me to pretend you don't exist."
Vilonik treated us to some more bowing and then took his seat. Junip folded his hands.
"We seem to have ourselves a situation, don't we?"
Colonel Rage leaned forward. "How about you spare us the smug posturing and get to the point? If you want us to acknowledge that you hold all the cards, and that we're in your power, then I'll go ahead and do it now. I'll save you some of your precious time." Ardov snickered. I never much liked a snickering Ardov, but he'd only become more impressed with himself as Junip's lapdog. Or cat. Or whatever. Junip cocked his head.
"Very good. It is true. Whatever fate we choose for you, you will have to endure it. I shall not get into debates with you about who is responsible for the current impasses. The human children have been unwilling to acknowledge their culpability in the past, and I doubt they will be willing to do so now.
I do not see that you have been quick to acknowledge blame either, Charles observed. Ardov began to step forward like he was going to power shove Charles through a wall, but Junip held up a staying hand, commanding his minion to be at peace. It was right out of the bad guy manual.
In the end, Junip explained, it does not matter if you admit to wrongdoing or deny it. Either way, you are accused of terrible crimes. The investigation into your guilt will be time-consuming and not in the best interest of the Confederation. The end result will quite possibly lead to jail time for most of you. The best possible outcome after years of inquiry and detention will likely be exile.
Director Gliwicksix offered our worlds a chance to reapply for Confederation membership, I said.
Perhaps you recall destroying the ship on which Director Gliwicksix was traveling,
Junip said.
Bargains proposed by her administration were voided the moment you caused her to explode. I know it is your inclination to reveal private conversations to data collectors and thus turn every encounter into a bargaining session. But there is no prize at the end of this one, Mr. Reynolds. Your people will either be exiled from this station or detained indefinitely in prison. There is no third possibility, except, of course, for you in particular.
He leveled his large brown eyes at me.
The Fedic Empire still seeks to put you on trial for your crimes. Delivering you to the Fads would make a generous opening move in our upcoming peace negotiations.
So, you're dealing with the Fads now? I asked.
We have never believed in isolation,
he said, looking smug. Is that how Nora Price got out of prison? I asked. Because you don't believe in isolation?
It was a simple prisoner exchange,
Junip told me. He didn't appear to be even slightly embarrassed. Handing over traitors to the enemy seemed to be business as usual for him.
It is all very regular.
I don't see how regular it is for you to free someone who betrayed my planet, I said.
I didn't,
Junip assured me.
The prisoner exchange was approved by Gliwicksix. You see, you are always looking to put people in categories, good and evil and so forth. The truth is always more complicated than we might like. Life is full of compromise.
I knew that politicians often did things that were pretty unsavory because they were looking at the bigger picture, but I still hated that they had let Nora Price go. Still, Gliwicksix was supposed to be on the right side of things, so I could only hope she'd gotten something important in return.
Now,
Junip said,
are you done challenging me, or should I proceed to initiate another prisoner exchange? I can only imagine what they would trade for Ezekiel Reynolds.
You've made your point, Colonel Rage growled. I acknowledge that you had the upper hand when we began, but you still want something from us, or you wouldn't be here, so let's get to the point.
Very well,
Junip said.
I should prefer that any inquiry into the kind disposition not drag out indefinitely in the public sphere. While I do not believe that anyone in Confederation government has anything to hide, these sorts of debates tend to lead to inevitable doubts and theories of complicity. This is a time of transition in the Confederation, and I take over for my predecessor under difficult circumstances. If the only eyewitnesses to the destruction of this ship, the very beings accused of being complicit in its destruction, were to disappear, a thorough investigation would be impossible, and the matter would have to be dropped.
You want us gone, the Colonel said.
Correct. I can arrange a way off the station and back to the squalor of your home planets. You would no longer be my problem, and I would no longer be yours. Does this sound appealing to you?
I'd come here hoping to get the ball rolling so Earth could become a member in an advanced and peaceful galactic civilization, but that prospect was pretty much off the table. This morning, an offer to call it quits and get everyone off the station would have sounded pretty good. But Dr. Roop needed me to go to the Forbidden Zone, and I'd promised him I would do it. I needed to find a way to get everyone home, and also help Dr. Roop. I think we're all interested, Misan said. The Colonel was about to say something, but Alice cut him off.
What's the catch?
Junip leaned forward and glowered at her.
I beg your pardon.
Come on, she said. It can't be that simple. I know how you operate.
I noticed that Tamret was glowering at Alice, but I had no idea if she was annoyed by the interruption or irritated that the role of disruptive female had gone to someone else.
Young lady, you have seen very little since your illegal boarding of our ship,
Junip said with a sneer.
I find it unlikely that you know much at all.
I've seen enough to doubt that you'd simply give us what we want without expecting something in return. So let's hear it.
Whatever agreement Gliwixix made with these savages, it didn't include her, Ardov said. I can remove her. Junip did his evil dude hand raise again.
You are moderately perceptive,
he said to Alice.
For a member of so underdeveloped a species. As it happens, I will need a show of good faith before I can trust you with my plan for your departure.
Alice looked around the room.
Told you,
she said triumphantly. Junip sighed.
In 2 days, you will have an interview with Bordi Opsilik, who is now serving as Chief Justice of the Xeno Affairs Judicial Council. My replacement, in other words.
He paused and adopted a listening pose, like he wanted us to tell him that no one could ever replace him.
Surely a successor, not a replacement,
volunteered Volonic, and we all groaned.
He seemed to want to hear it,
Volonic said apologetically.
The Chief Justice will be responsible for the major inquiry into the events on board the Kind Disposition. He wanted a preliminary and less formal fact-finding session, though everything you say will be considered part of the public record. When you meet with him, I would prefer it if you would take as much responsibility for the destruction of the ship as you can, barring any admission of criminal activity. That would require your arrest, which I admit would be pleasant, but I understand you have no motivation to deliver yourselves to prison. You must hint that you made mistakes, showed poor judgment, and acted in ways that resulted, without your intention, in the destruction of the ship. Make no mention of the preposterous allegations of a mutiny against the captain or illegal activity by the Movement of Peace. I suggest you play it as a misunderstanding precipitated by failure of leadership on Captain Hyai's part. Also, I would like you to mention my nephew's heroic efforts to save the ship.
None of us said anything for a moment. You're asking us to let you quite literally get away with murder, the colonel said, his voice quiet.
I am guilty of nothing,
Junip snapped.
Your shuttle caused a missile to strike the Kind Disposition. That is beyond dispute. What happened up until that event is uncertain. I do not understand all the details, and neither do you. All I am asking is that you emphasize that uncertainty rather than speculate.
While hanging Hyai out to dry, the colonel said. As a military man, he clearly didn't like the idea of blame being pinned on a dead officer who, as near as we could tell, had done nothing wrong.
He won't mind,
Junip said.
And the truth is your testimony will sow doubt, but nothing more. It will raise lines of inquiry, but you'll be gone and unable to answer additional questions.
And if we do not take this offer? Charles asked.
Then the hearings will continue, and I guarantee you will end up in prison. That means all of you. This is part of a plot you put together before you left the station last time, and the Ishi and the Rarls were in on it too. The only one of you who won't be spending the rest of his life in our prison system will be Zeke, who will enjoy the honorable traditions of Fadic legal systems.
But that is not just,
Vilonic said.
Tamret and I weren't there. Why should we have to suffer for their actions?
Good to know you're a team player, mate, Steve said.
I suppose,
Junip said,
a deal could be struck for those of you not from Earth if you can provide testimony that will help us understand the character of those who committed these terrible crimes against the Confederation.
So to get home, they would have to testify against us. Vilonic didn't seem to me to be the sort of guy who would be able to resist that kind of pressure. As if to prove my point, Vilonic said,
I don't know anything, but I can assure you I will cooperate in any way I can.
Junip's nose twitched, and his goatee mouth stretched. A smile, perhaps?
I thought you might feel that way.
The colonel sighed. All right, I think we get the picture. For the sake of argument, let's say we go along with your plan. How does it work?
After you have performed adequately, when being interviewed by Bordy Opsilic, I shall arrange for you to make your way off station. There is a transport shuttle housed near the landing pad, marked Diplomatic Transport. That being,
he pointed at Tamrat,
will use her computer skills to bypass its security locks and change its identification code to avoid notice by the traffic drones. You will then make your way to the main starport, where you will find a ship docked in the bay 343-585-087. You will take this ship and no other.
He leveled his gaze at Steve.
There will be the illusion of pursuit, but it's a fast ship and you'll have enough of a lead that you will be able to tunnel out before we can overtake you.
You plan to stage our escape? Mi-san said, stating the obvious.
I think it's best for everyone. That ship's navigation computer will contain coordinates for your worlds. You may bring your friends to Rarl and Ishi and then return to Earth.
Colonel Rage, I observed, was doing his best to act neutral, like this wasn't the best possible deal he could have hoped for.
How do we know we can trust you? Because I want you gone more than I want you punished,
Junip said.
So, you plan to let us take a ship and keep it?
The colonel prodded.
As you are a primitive, militaristic species, he answered, one that should never have been offered Confederation membership in the first place, I have no doubt you're already salivating at the prospect of reverse engineering our technology. Please know that the ship and all its components will have been treated with a corrosive nanite agent. Exactly 15 standard days from the moment you fire up the engines, these nanites will begin taking that ship apart, molecule by molecule. Within 6 hours of that, the ship will have vanished. I'm giving you no gifts, Colonel, except, of course, your freedom.
Colonel Rage leaned forward. This is a lot to chew over. We're going to have to consider your offer, Interim Director. Let me propose a counter. Junip stood, interrupting the colonel.
I'm not here to negotiate. I have set forth my requirements and my rewards. You may either accept this generous proposal, or you can be punished. I will not belittle myself by quibbling over details with savages.
Junip turned and allowed us to enjoy his cape fluttering as he walked out of the room. Ardov followed him and paused briefly at the door. He turned back and grinned at us. At me. And then was gone. Steve almost leapt out of his chair. What a load of... The colonel held up a hand, though. I don't think we should discuss this matter in this room. Let's take a walk, shall we? We sat in a circle on the front lawn. Temret's face was a mask of misery, but everyone looked grim in their own way. Everyone but Vilonic, that is, who seemed to find the prospect of returning home delightful. I'm not sure what there is to discuss, Mi-san said. We wanted to escape, and this is our chance.
The problem,
Alice said,
is that if we do that, we're helping Junip. We're giving him what he wants.
I hate that, Mi-san said, but the game is rigged. We're going to lose if we stay. There was nothing I liked about Junip's offer. Dr. Rook needed me to go to the Forbidden Zone, and I meant to try. If there was a chance to help him, which meant helping the Confederation and all of our home planets, I meant to take it. But that wasn't the only reason I was against this deal. He killed Nyana, I said. He killed Urge. Sometimes you have to walk away, the colonel said. I don't like it any better than you do, but we're out of our depth here. Getting everyone landed in prison isn't going to bring your friends back. I, too, wish we could punish him for what he has done, Charles said. But beyond that, I don't believe we can accept that everything will be as he claims. What if the ship isn't where it's supposed to be, or if it is rigged to explode? How do we know he will provide as he says he will? I believe him, because his scheme works out for him too, the colonel said. This is the perfect solution. He gets rid of us, and the fact that we've hightailed it out of here makes him look guilty. I'm trying to think how he might be planning on double-crossing us, but I don't see that he has anything to gain by doing that. The sooner we're nothing but a memory, the better off he is. And if we leave in a way that makes us look bad, he comes out smelling like a rose.
Then you want to do this?
Misan asked. Not exactly, the colonel said. I don't like this degrading ship business. Makes me nervous, and it takes away our advantage. I didn't come all this way just to leave empty-handed.
Junip did not appear open to negotiation, Charles said. His is the only deal on the table.
Then maybe we should help ourselves to something on another table. The colonel looked at Steve. You're the ship thief?
That's right, mate.
Any interest in stealing 2 ships? Everyone stared at the colonel. The only thing we need from the ship he's giving us is the coordinates to our worlds. What if we take 2 ships and then rendezvous? Whoever's on the one Junip left for us will transfer over to the ship that isn't going to degrade.
That's one way to handle it, Steve said. Another is to program Junip's ship to fly off on its own. It'll look like we've taken it, but we'll just be on another one.
But the navigation information we need,
Misan said. Tamrat leaned into Vilonik and whispered something in his ear. He nodded at her.
I can get that before we leave,
Tamrat said. I stared at her, not because of what she'd proposed, but because I hadn't heard her say so many words since she'd first arrived. She was almost smiling now, and the vaguest hint of the old Tamrat was visible, if only for an instant. I like that plan, the colonel said with a grin. You kids are good. While all eyes are on that other ship, we'll quietly slip out unnoticed. There's something else we need to talk about, I said. I looked around to make sure no one was watching us. I was still worried that our conversations might not be private, but Smelly had said it would know if we were being monitored, and I had no choice but to believe it. Dr. Roop got in touch with me, and I went to go see him. This got everyone's attention, even Colonel Rage, who had not met Dr. Roop but had certainly heard a great deal about him. He took a huge risk by meeting me, I said, and he made it clear we have to pursue Director Gleewicksix's plan. We have to find the hidden fortress and get that skill tree. He's counting on us.
Forgive me,
said Vilonik,
but I'm not familiar with either this Dr. Roop or the fortress you speak of.
The director didn't provide us with a plan, the colonel said, ignoring Vilonik. She told us her goal. We never discussed mission parameters or security concerns or anything else we would need before going into an unknown and hostile environment. I'd love to get a hold of this skill tree, she mentioned. It could give Earth an advantage that we need. But I'm not going blind into an engagement, and certainly not when you young people are my responsibility.
Again,
Vilonik said,
I have not yet been informed of these critical details. I cannot make any decision on Tamrat's behalf until I know more.
How about we let Tamrat make the decision on her own? I suggested.
Please, Zeke,
Vilonik said, sounding a little frustrated.
I ask you to respect our caste customs. We've discussed the problems created when you try to interfere with our private business.
I'm not interfering with your private business. I'm interfering with Tamrat's, and I feel pretty good about that.
I will have to excuse what to me appears as rudeness,
Vilonik said.
I'm sure it's simply our inability to understand our customs. I know in my heart that Tamrat's friend would never intentionally insult her as you do now.
The colonel made a throat-slitting gesture with his finger. Kill it. We don't have the time for this nonsense, and I'm afraid we also don't have the means of looking for that skill tree. I know you want to help your friend, and I respect that, but there are too many unknown variables and too much risk. We need to escape, and on the best terms we possibly can. That means in 2 days we tell this Chief Justice what Junip wants to hear. We suck it up, take our lumps, and get out of here in one piece. There's more to this than just helping Dr. Roop, I said. If we can find that skill tree, it will help the entire Confederation, and it will help us. Once we hand over this technology, people will be more inclined to listen to what we have to say. This could turn everything around. The colonel sighed. I'm sorry, Zeke, but I don't see that happening. If you find that software, Junip will take credit, and we'll be back where we started, only worse. because now Junip will have one more reason to want us dead. I've listened to your options, which I take seriously. I've weighed the facts and I've made my decision. The matter is now closed. I opened my mouth to argue, but I could see everyone looking away. They wanted me to stop. They wanted to take Junip's deal, and without their help I couldn't do much of anything. I'd come to Confederation Central to help Earth, and to help Tamret, and it looked like I'd be running away without doing either of those things.